Okay, class, sorry about that. We were looking at our Boolean variable, and we saw that a Boolean variable already evaluates to true or false, so it could be considered our complete condition in our if statement. Now, sometimes we need some different alternatives, so we can use a multiple alternative selection. We can say if a certain condition is true, we want to execute this if statement body. Otherwise, if some other condition is true, which is specified, we want to execute a different set of code. Else, if a third condition is true, we want to execute this code. And finally, we can have a final else that says, if all else fails, execute this code or else clause. Now, when we do a multiple alternative selection like this, we are only going to select one of these options. When we are working with our code, it's not going to fall through and execute more than one of these conditions because we have specified that they are all part of one big condition. Here's an example. In this case, we're interrogating our hair color. We've prompted for a hair color, and we're saying if that hair color is 1, we want to output a message. Else, if our hair color is 2, a different message. Else, if it's 3, a different message. And lastly, if it's none of those, we want to output a message that says, please select. Then no matter what, we're going to output this message, great job, because we are done with our if statement. Our entire structure is completed. We didn't need any opening and closing curly braces in this if statement structure because each if statement only resulted in one line of code being executed. Now here's another situation where we have our multiple alternatives, where this is what a flowchart would look like for that. Here we're checking our hair color. If it's 1, we'll do something, 2, etc. We can also use what's called a switch or a switch case statement to have the same impact. So in this case, we've set up a switch statement and we've said we want to switch on the variable hair color. And if the hair color is 1, we want to execute this code. If it's 2, this code, 3, this code. Otherwise, we're going to output this message. Now let's take a look at our switch statement. First of all, the keyword switch is required. Then our variable name is enclosed within parentheses to be evaluated. And then we have an opening and closing curly brace for our entire switch statement. And then each of our case structures use the keyword case followed by the number we're wanting to check for and a colon to indicate that that's the end of our case statement. So it's a really efficient structure. Works great for lots of different situations. Here's a flowchart that shows a little bit more of what a switch case would look like. Now, sometimes we need to evaluate more complex conditions. So we can use the logical operators and, or, and not. And we can make our conditions as complex as we like. So we're always going to be considering the readability of our condition and the maintainability of our code. This is a truth table. You should have seen something like this before. In this case, we're saying we have a variable x and a variable y. If they start out with values both of true, then x or y as a condition would be true. X and y as a condition would be true, but not x, saying that x should be false, would be false because it's going to make everything's backwards. So we can set up a truth table for any variables that we're concerned with in our program, like my favorite variable and my second favorite variable, and check to make sure through our truth table that we're checking for all the different possible conditions and that we're executing the right code depending on those conditions. Now, within Java, we have a more advanced if statement capability called a conditional operator. And in this case, we have syntax that is if and then a condition within parentheses. Note your if would be in lowercase. Sorry, PowerPoint kept making it uppercase for me because PowerPoint doesn't like code, and I should have done something different. But we're saying if this condition is true, do what comes after the question mark. So do some true stuff. Otherwise, do what comes after the colon. So in this case, we do some false stuff. So here's another example. We could say if choice equals 1, then set the choice 1 variable equal to true. Otherwise, set the choice 1 variable to false. Or we could shortcut things even more and say the choice 1 variable equals an evaluation of choice 1 equaling 1. And if that evaluation is true, the choice 1 variable would end up with this true value. And if this evaluation was false, our choice 1 variable would end up with this false evaluation. So we can do a lot of code condensing, I guess, with that. So great stuff. All right, so we have a lot here to look at when we're just looking at if statements. If I bring up our modules again, I'm going to go to Ravel and look at the chapter 3 reading. Click on September 12th. There's chapter 3. Now, I could look through everything here, and I want you to do that. These case studies, all of this code is stuff that you should be typing on your own as practice so that you feel comfortable typing your Java code. Don't copy and paste out of Ravel. Remember, that won't help you at all because you need some practice, and then as you're working with things, it'll just be natural to you to type things in the correct way. Now I'm going to go to the table of contents, and looking at chapter 3, I want to bring up our programming exercises from the book. Now you don't have any exercises assigned from chapter 3 for this week, just one from chapter 5, but let's take a look at some. Now, when you're looking at your exercises, remember at the end of the Ravel stuff in the special features, there are answers to all of the even numbered problems, so you can grab those and be working through things. I was looking at stuff, and I think we should try this one, 3.5, find future dates. So this says to write a program that prompts the user to enter an integer for today's day of the week. Sunday is 0, Monday is 1, etc. And prompt the user to enter the number of days after today for a future day and display the future day of the week. So here's our sample. We would ask for today's day and then say how many days have passed since that day, and then the output would be today is Monday and the future day is Thursday. So we won't get into the validity of that output, right? So let's look at how we could write that program together. I believe I have NetBeans going, so I'm going to create a new project. And this is going to be exercise chapter 3, number 5. I'll go ahead and delete this information with the period so that I don't get a separate package. So we know hypergrade doesn't like that, so we'll just get used to that. Now I have my exercise 3, and what I need to do in this program is prompt the user for some input. So when we're working in our main, the first thing we're going to do is set up our scanner, right? So let me find this. And I'll just call the scanner input like Our book always does. I'm doing it the long way. So I've got my scanner set up as an input now. I'm going to prompt the user to enter an integer for today. So I've got a space there so that the prompt will be nice, but it is just a print. And then I'm going to create an integer named today to read in our data. Come on, baby. Okay. That looks good. So I've said I want today's date, and then I'm reading it in to an integer named today. Now we're going to ask for some additional information. Maybe. And this time we want to enter the number of days that are elapsed since today. We'll call our variable elapsed days. That's going to hold that data. And we'll just get our next integer input from our scanner. Now, we're going to set up a string variable that's going to hold the name for today. And if today is 0, we're going to say it's Sunday. And we're going to continue on, else if today equals 1, that'll be Monday. And else if today equals 2, Tuesday. I'll go ahead and copy a couple of those. Now, when you copy and paste, it goes without saying that you'll have to be careful to get everything changed. So let's see, I see a little typo there anyway, so I'm going to go with 3, and that's going to put me at Wednesday. And then 4 be Thursday. And then we'd have 5 equaling Friday. And finally 6 is Saturday. So that's going to set up our string value that is the name of today's date. In our if statement, we did everything with else if statements. We didn't need any curly braces because we only had one line of code in each if clause. Now let's calculate what day our future date is, and we'll put that into a variable named future day. and that's going to be today plus our elapsed days. And then we're going to go ahead and do a mod 7 on that so that we get a number that's less than 7. And we're working with a range of 7, so we want to divide by 7 to get our value there. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up another string, but it's going to be our name for our future day. And we're going to basically do the same thing here. So we're going to say if future, could we use a switch case maybe? Switch future day. And we're going to say, hey, if that is 0, then name for future day equals Sunday. If it's 1, Monday. If it's 2, now you might have an editor that you like to use that's got a little bit better recognition here, filling things in. Finally, Saturday. Now that's the end of my select case or switch case statement. So all we need to do is output our final message. I'm going to use a print line so that we go to a new line, and we're going to say today is space, and then we're going to add our name for today, and then we're going to add a string, and the future day is, and we've got this preceded and followed by a space, name for future day. Now, we know that we have these variables initialized, right, because we've got our code here, but our editor is getting upset with us about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and initialize these variables when they're declared as empty strings, or 2 quotes, and then that gets rid of those errors because the compiler is like, oh, okay, you have that set properly to a value. And then I'm going to run this, and I'm going to say that today's day is 5, and the number of days elapsed is 3, so that's Friday. And the future day is Saturday. That doesn't seem to have worked quite right, does it? It should have come out with Monday. Doesn't like our future day. So are we not being able to use our select case statement? What's wrong here? Alt Enter. Let's try an Alt